Hey guys, we're going to be going over the stolen party, and you're going to be using your guided notes on this particular story. Those are on Google Classroom, just like usual. Again, you don't have to fill in the notes for any kind of points, but it's very helpful for any kind of writing assignment or for the quizzes or anything like that. So let's go ahead and talk about the stolen party. I really like this story. It's one of my favorite stories, just because it had such an unexpected ending. Okay, so looking through the guided notes. The author of The Stolen Party is Liliana Hecker. And on your notes, you'll notice it says author and then it says born year. She was born in 1943. And it says is a, and you're going to put in there Argentine writer. She was born where? In Buenos Aires. And her professional writing started at age 17, so very young. And there's a picture of her for you right there. This particular story that we're going to read is called The Stolen Party again, and it was published in 1982. So we're going to talk about the central questions. It says things to consider here, but these are central questions that we have for this particular story. The first one is, how do our perceptions and our prejudices affect our experiences? Like how we see things and how we are biased or prejudiced against things or for things. How does that affect our experience? And number two, you're going to recognize this central question because we talked about it with Flowers for Algernon. This says, can wisdom and knowledge make you a happier or unhappier person? And again, we visited that central question with Flowers of Algernon, so it's applicable here. Okay, we're going to go to this presentation. It's something that was done, I think it was done by students, but I really like it, so we're going to use it. It's going to go along with your notes. All right, we've already have a lot of those things. Here is our summary, and you can go ahead and put those in your bullet points. This is about a girl named Rosara. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name, Rosara. That's how I'd say it. 9-year-old Rosara, and she is the daughter of a maid. She became friends with a girl named Luciana, the daughter of the mom's boss or the mom's employer. Rosara was invited to Luciana's party. Her mother was at first hesitant to let her go, and it almost seemed like her mom was kind of mean about it. But Rosara had a great time and helped out at the party. And in the end, she actually realized that she was not there as a guest, but actually to help out and help to serve. That's the summary of the story. The theme of the story. The most obvious theme in this particular story is social ranking, which of course is a pretty serious issue in our society. This author, Hecker, carried this theme throughout because Rosara misinterpreted why she was invited to the party and what her place was there. She thought she was there because she was a friend, because she loved the people in the household and she thought they loved her too. And she thought she was there as a regular guest, just as an equal. But of course, she was not. The thematic statement in this is people will discriminate against others based on their rank in society. Going to our 4 supporting elements on your note sheet. The first one is character. The second is the use of irony. The third is setting. And the fourth is conflict. So let's take a look at character. In this story, Rosara is our protagonist. She is our, what we call a good guy. She is the guy that the person, the character that we are sympathetic toward. Now, she changes throughout the story. At the beginning of the story, she has one mindset, and at the end, she has a very different mindset, which makes her a dynamic character. So on your note sheet, you will see that it has where it says Rosara is the protagonist, and she is a dynamic character. I want you to know the different definitions for both dynamic and static. Dynamic is a character that changes somewhat in a fairly significant way throughout the course of a story or a movie or a book. Like they change in some basic fundamental, their outlook, their actions, the way they feel things, the way they see things. And Rosara definitely changes her outlook toward who she is and what her role is at this party within the context of this story. A static character, however, is a character that does not change. They maintain the same mindset or the same perceptions, and they don't really do a lot of growing or developing within the story. So now let's take a closer look at all of these characters. Again, Rosara is our main character, and she thinks she's going to this party because, she's invited and she's a friend of the little girl that lives in the household. We also have Rosara's mother, and it's important that she is included in this story because she is the person who speaks the truth. We don't want to see it at first. We kind of think she's being mean. Rosara thinks she's being mean, but she's really, really very smart because she has a lot of experiences in how the world actually works, and she really does know how this is going to play out. She's hopeful that it doesn't play out that way, but she really does kind of know. And she tries to tell Rosara, and Rosara just won't listen. And we have the main antagonist, which is our kind of our bad guy, the one we don't like in this story. And that is Luciana's cousin. She's the girl with the bow in her hair, the blonde girl. And that girl really insists that Luciana is not friends with Rosara. She says, I know all her friends, you can't be. And Rosara is forced to tell how she knows Luciana. And she says she's the daughter of an employee. Now, you see that when her mom told her to say that, you can see that there is some kind of social stigma to saying she's the daughter of the maid, so she doesn't say that. Another antagonist in this story is Senora Inés, and we don't realize that until the very end because Senora Inés seems very nice, and Senora Inés doesn't know that she is an antagonist. She just thinks she's, being who she is. She does not know there's a misinterpretation. But we see that she's really hurt Rosara at the end of the story. The setting of the story, the setting takes place mainly in Luciana's huge house at the birthday party. This is the main house. This is the house that Rosara's mother works in. And Rosara often goes into the kitchen area because her mom does work there. And because of that, she's the only one that's allowed into the kitchen during this party. She sees this as an advantage. She sees this as a special privilege. But we know at the end it's only because, her mother has worked there. And so she's seen as kind of a worker that would work in the kitchen. Our conflict here is two kinds. We have person versus person. And then as Rosara, who is fighting against her mother about going to the party. At the beginning, Rosara's like, you don't know, they're rich, they're still good people. You just don't like them because they're rich. And that's really, really not the reason. She just knows that there's going to be like a difference in how they look at Rosara. Her mother knows that they're going to look at Rosara in a different way because she is the daughter of a maid. We also see conflict in the girl with the bow, the blonde girl, the guest, that's like making fun of Rosara and taunting her, saying that she's not actually a guest there, that she's not a friend of Luciana's. And then we also see with the conflict that you have at the very end that Senora Inés is using Rosara kind of as a servant or a serving person because she thinks she's allowed to because she's the daughter of a maid. Now, our second conflict is person versus society. Rosara is viewed differently and treated differently because she's viewed as lower class. She's viewed at lower class in this society because she is the daughter of the maid who works in that house. So there is a ranking there. There is an outlook of they're not of the same social importance or social class. We're going to skip resolution. It's going to go to that, but I'm going to skip it because we're going to talk about it in a little bit. Point of view, and of course we know point of view is the perspective in this story, and we see this through third person. Remember, first person is like I did this, second person is you did this, and third person is giving a name. So we see where it talks about Luciana did this and Rosara did this. So the third person, this is third person, and it is limited. And limited means that we only really see it from the perspective of Rosara. We only see how she feels and how she thinks. We don't really see it through anybody else's eyes. The narrator only tells the thoughts and feelings of one character, and in this case, that is Rosara. Irony. Irony, the definition for irony is a discrepancy between what is expected and what actually happens in the story. And we see that in this story. We see a couple different things that are ironic. There are three basic types of irony. We have situational irony, we have verbal irony, and we have dramatic irony. Okay, and of those, we're going to see some examples. When things don't turn out the way that they're supposed to turn out, the way we thought they were going to turn out, that's when we see an example of irony. And we see with Senora Inez that when Rosara thought she was going to get a gift as a guest in the party, but instead what she did is she gave her money. And we didn't expect that. Rosara didn't expect that. And we know through that action that she's only regarded as a servant. Now, there's also some verbal irony here, where the magician at the party thought Rosara was special and called her a countess, which is a really royal thing. And Senora Inez called her pet. And we see pet, I mean, I think she meant it affectionately, but what it really indicates is she's not high ranking. She's somebody to like keep and pet and like kind of an owner almost of Rosara. We have a symbol in this particular story. I don't think I have it written down for you on your notes, but the symbol here is the monkey. And the monkey represents the wonder of being rich, like how much is out there that Rosara doesn't even know about. When Rosara goes to tell her mother about that monkey being at the party, Rosara's mother didn't even believe it because it was such a luxury, such a thing that she couldn't even imagine. So that monkey represents the idea of being rich. And when Rosara got to hold that monkey and do things with that monkey, that kind of tells us that that's symbolic of Rosara getting to experience for just a brief moment that freedom of being rich, that luxury of being rich, being able to touch it and feel it and hold it, but it's soon taken away from her. Now, the question is in this story, and I'm going to have I'm not going to have you write this, but I just want you to think about it. Why do you think the title of this story is The Stolen Party? And this is an assignment from somebody else's class. So you don't have to do it, but like take a minute to think about why do you think the title is The Stolen Party? Whose party is stolen and why is it stolen? And then again, this is another thing that I don't need you to do necessarily, but we often associate things with our own lives and our own world. So just kind of think about why people look down on other people for reasons like social ranking or wealth. And had you been in actual class, we would have taken 5 minutes to like brainstorm that. But of course, we're not in class or online, so you don't need to do that. But think about those things. Now, at the end of this story, Rosara becomes very, very conscious about how people are treating her. And she becomes very aware that people are treating her a certain way because of her mother's status. She is attached as a maid because her mom is attached as a maid. And she realizes that her mom was correct all along. And Senora Inez did not think of her as a guest or an equal to her own daughter. She thought of her as someone who would help out and who would help serve, and she was going to pay her for that. Okay, that is the end of this Prezi, but not the end of what I want you to know. So we're going to go on. Give me just a second to shut this down. Go back to our PowerPoint, and I'm just going to go over some stuff for you really quickly. Here we have the plot diagram, and again, I'm just going to talk about it a little bit. At the beginning, we have the exposition. And that exposition, the beginning of the story, is the mother's reluctance to accept the rich people at the party. Now, Rosara sees that as being very judgmental at the beginning, but we know, in fact, that she's basing this on experience and she's worried about her daughter getting hurt. The rising action, even though she worries about it, she's not going to keep Rosara from going. So she gets her ready for the party, making sure she looks beautiful with pressing her dress and starching it and making sure her hair is nice and pretty. And Rosara feels very, very special. And when Rosara gets to the party, she asks about the monkey and she's allowed into the kitchen to see it, even though the other kids aren't. And we know, because we wrote the story, that the reason for that is because Rosara has been in the kitchen before. She's been a person, her mom serves in that kitchen. So of course she would be, associated with that place. And it's not an advantage. It's actually something that's like kind of holding her down as far as rank. The climax of this story comes very quickly because the story ends so abruptly. Rosario gets into an argument with this blonde girl with the bow, Luciana's cousin, about whether or not she belongs there and whether she's a friend to Luciana. And of course, Rosario thinks she's a friend, but is actuality just the daughter of a servant. The conflict, of course, is that she thinks she's friends, but she's not. Now, the following action, Rosario has a great time at this party. She wins the racing games. All the boys like her and want her to be on the team. She feels very special. Senora Inez asks her to help pass out hot dogs and cake, so she feels that's an advantage. She's not looking at it as something that's a negative. She's seeing that as something like special, like I must be doing really well because they're asking me to help. She also associates the fact that she's able to pass the cake out, like she thinks of herself like a princess or a queen, like handing out things to people she likes the most. And she gives the girl with the blonde bow, because she doesn't like her, she gives her a very thin slice. Rosario also helps out the magician with the monkey because what she calls the fat boy drops the monkey and she thinks that's terrible. And then at the end, we have this really abrupt resolution, which really doesn't end at all. It just kind of stops. Rosario and her mother are leaving the party, and Rosario is at the top of her, she's at the top of the world. She thinks she's had this wonderful time, and it was a magical party. And she's like, I was the best behaved, and they picked me, and I was special. And Senora Inez goes over to give Rosario something, and Rosario is like, oh, I'm getting a yo-yo or a bracelet, just like the other kids. And instead, she thanks her as a pet for assisting at the party and hands her money. And Rosario knows in that moment that she was only regarded as a maid, just a young one, and she helped out at the party. She didn't really come as a guest at the party. It's just a map really quickly of Argentina so you can see where it's located. So right down in here. You guys don't know this about me, but actually I lived right here in Colombia for 2 years. I taught overseas in Colombia for 2 years, so not very far from Argentina. All right, so that is it for today's notes.